The twin suns of the alien world Valara rose slowly over the horizon, casting long golden shadows across the Academy courtyard. The Academy was one of the grandest learning places on the planet. Its tall crystal towers gleamed under the light, and its wide halls were filled with students from many different species. To an outsider, it might look like a place of peace and knowledge. But Arya knew better. For her, the Academy was not a place of learning. It was a place of survival. Arya walked quietly, her steps soft against the polished stone floor as she carried her food tray. Her hands shook slightly, not because the tray was heavy, but because of the eyes that followed her every move. She could feel them, cold, judging, full of silent mockery. Her hair was a soft silver color, a trait from her father's side, but her skin carried a faint golden hue from her mother's heritage. To most, it was a harmless difference, but on Valara, mixed heritage was a stain. The Academy students whispered cruel names, half-blood, dustborn, unclean, and so every day, Arya was forced to eat outside. The Academy had a rule, an old tradition wrapped in the excuse of purity. Students of pure bloodlines ate in the grand dining hall beneath shining chandeliers, while those considered dirty were sent to the courtyard, where the winds blew dust across their food and the sun baked their backs. Arya never argued. She never shouted. She never cried in public. Instead, she lowered her head, found a quiet corner, and tried to make herself invisible. That was her survival. Today was no different. She pushed open the door to the courtyard and stepped into the dry air. The courtyard was wide, with stone benches lining the walls, but it was empty except for her. The laughter from the dining hall drifted faintly through the windows behind her, reminding her of the world she was excluded from. She sat on a bench, placed her tray on her lap, and looked at the meal. A bowl of warm broth, a slice of bread, and a small cup of fruit. The food was fine, but it always tasted bitter to her here. Not because of the flavor, but because of what it meant. She lifted the spoon slowly, but before she could take her first bite, the window behind her opened. "Look at her," a voice sneered. It was a boy's voice, sharp and mocking. The dustborn queen eating like a stray animal again. Another voice laughed. "Careful, don't get too close. If her dirty blood touches your food, you'll catch it too." Laughter erupted from inside. Arya's hand tightened around the spoon. She kept her eyes on the broth, refusing to look up. If she ignored them, maybe they would stop. Maybe they would grow bored, but they never grew bored. The voices threw more words, sharper than stones. Arya swallowed hard, pushing the food into her mouth just to make herself finish quickly. The sooner she ate, the sooner she could leave. When the window finally closed, she let out a shaky breath. She stared at her hands, noticing how tightly her fingers had curled. They hurt, but she didn't relax them. Her thoughts drifted to her mother. Her mother had always told her, "Your blood is not dirty, Arya. It is strong. It carries two worlds inside it." But her mother wasn't here. Her mother was far away, working long hours to provide for her. And here, inside the Academy, words of love could not protect her. The courtyard door creaked open. Arya stiffened, expecting more laughter, more taunts. But instead, footsteps approached, steady, calm, unfamiliar. A boy stood in the doorway, his figure outlined by the sunlight behind him. He was taller than most of the students she had seen, with short brown hair and eyes that carried a strange warmth. His clothes marked him as new, the uniform crisp and uncreased. He carried a food tray, but instead of walking back to the dining hall, he stepped out into the courtyard. Arya froze. Students never came here. This was her prison, her exile. What was he doing? The boy looked around, then spotted her sitting on the bench. For a moment, he just studied her, his eyes calm and thoughtful. Then, without hesitation, he walked toward her. Arya's chest tightened. She lowered her gaze, bracing for insults for another cruel joke. But the boy said nothing. He simply sat down on the bench across from her. The sound of his tray setting down on the stone made her glance up, surprised. He smiled. "Mind if I eat here?" Arya blinked. His voice was strange, different from the others. It wasn't sharp or mocking. It was simple, friendly. You don't have to," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know," the boy replied, picking up his bread. "But I want to." Arya didn't know what to say. She stared at him, confused. "You're new." "Yeah," he nodded. "Name's Daniel. From Earth." Her eyes widened slightly. She had heard of humans. Everyone had. They were the newcomers to the galaxy. the ones other species often underestimated, but they were also strange, unpredictable, bold, and free in ways that Valara's people could not understand. Daniel took a bite of bread, chewed, and grinned at her. "So do you always eat out here? Seems lonely." Arya hesitated, shame curling in her chest. She looked away, her voice trembling. "I have to. Because I'm not pure," Daniel frowned. "Not pure?" She nodded, clutching her spoon tightly. "My father is Velaran. My mother is from the Solari. The council says that makes me dirty, so I can't eat inside with the others." Daniel was quiet for a moment. She expected him to laugh, or at least look at her with the same disgust as the others, but instead his frown deepened. His eyes hardened, not at her, but at the rule itself. "That's stupid," he said flatly. Arya's head snapped up. She stared at him in shock. No one had ever said that before. Not out loud, not so boldly. Daniel shrugged. Back on Earth, people used to say things like that too. They used to hate others because of skin or language or where their parents came from. It caused wars, suffering. But we learned. Took us a long time, but we learned. Arya's lips parted, but no words came. She had never heard anyone speak so freely about it. Daniel leaned forward slightly, his voice steady. "You're not dirty. They're just afraid of what they don't understand. That's their weakness, not yours." For a moment, the courtyard was silent. The sun blazed overhead, the dust swirled in the air, and Arya felt something she hadn't felt in years, a flicker of warmth in her chest. Someone believed her. Someone saw her not as broken, but as whole. She lowered her gaze, her face hot, and whispered, "Thank you." Daniel smiled. "Don't thank me yet. Tomorrow I'm eating here again. If they want to call you dirty, then I guess I'm dirty too." Her eyes widened again. She shook her head quickly, panic rising. "No, you can't. They'll hate you." Daniel's smile didn't fade. "Let them. I've been hated before. Doesn't scare me." Arya stared at him, stunned. For the first time in her life at the academy, she felt less alone. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but deep inside she knew one thing. Something had changed. The next morning, the academy was buzzing with its usual noise. Students filled the hallways, their voices rising and falling in waves as they hurried to classes. The tall crystal walls glowed softly under the light of the twin suns, and the scent of polished stone filled the air. Arya moved quietly through the crowd. She kept her eyes down, holding her books close to her chest. The other students made space for her, not out of respect, but out of disgust. They looked at her the way one might look at dirt on the floor, something to avoid, something unworthy of notice. She was used to it. Every day was the same. Cruel laughter, whispered insults, cold stares. But today felt different. Her thoughts kept drifting back to the human boy, Daniel. The way he had sat beside her in the courtyard, the way he had spoken without fear, the way he had said, "That's stupid, no one had ever said that before." No one had ever stood beside her. Arya shook her head, trying to push the memory away. Maybe he had just been kind for a moment. Maybe he would forget about her today. It was safer not to hope. Hope only led to pain. When the lunch bell rang, Arya carried her tray once again to the courtyard. She pushed open the heavy door and stepped into the dry sunlight. The air was warm and the dust swirled lazily in the breeze. She walked to her usual bench and sat down. For a moment, the courtyard was silent. She almost believed she was alone. Then the door opened again. Arya's heart skipped. She turned her head and there he was, Daniel. His steps were steady, his tray balanced casually in his hands. He walked across the courtyard as though he belonged there, as though he didn't care that the dining hall behind him was filled with food, laughter, and comfort. He sat down on the same bench as yesterday. This time right beside her, Arya's breath caught. "Why are you here?" she whispered. Daniel grinned. "Told you I'd be back." Her eyes darted nervously toward the windows. She could already see faces pressed against the glass, students watching in shock. A wave of whispers rose from inside the dining hall. "You shouldn't," Arya began, her voice shaking. "I should," Daniel interrupted. He tore a piece of bread from his tray and popped it into his mouth. "I don't care what they think." Arya stared at him, torn between fear and something warmer, something she didn't dare name. From the windows, a voice shouted, "Look at him. The human is eating with the dustborn." Laughter erupted. Hands banged on the glass. Arya flinched, lowering her head, but Daniel didn't move. He kept eating calmly, his expression unbothered. Another voice shouted, "Hey, human, do you know what she is?" "She's filth." "She's nothing." Daniel finally set down his bread. He looked up at the windows, his eyes cold and steady. His voice was not loud, but it carried across the courtyard with sharp clarity. "Then I guess I'm nothing too," he said. The laughter died instantly. The silence that followed was heavier than any insult. Dozens of eyes stared down at him in disbelief. No one had ever dared to say such words. No one had ever defied the rule so openly. Arya's heart pounded in her chest. She couldn't breathe. She looked at Daniel, wide-eyed, unable to understand how he could speak so boldly. The windows slammed shut. Arya swallowed hard, her voice trembling. "Why did you say that? Now they'll hate you." Daniel shrugged, picking up his bread again. "Let them. I've been hated before. It never stopped me." His words were so simple yet so heavy. Arya stared at him, confused, curious, and afraid all at once. They ate in silence for a while. Arya's hands trembled less today. The food still tasted bitter, but it was softer somehow, lighter. For the first time, she wasn't truly alone. When the bell rang to end the meal, Daniel stood and picked up his tray. He looked at her with a small smile. "See you tomorrow?" Arya hesitated. Then slowly she nodded, but not everyone was smiling. Inside the dining hall, whispers turned into arguments. Students spoke in angry voices, their words carrying through the room. "Did you see him? He sat with her. Humans have no respect for our traditions. He's mocking us, mocking our purity." The teachers tried to quiet them, but even their faces showed discomfort. The academy had rules. The academy had traditions, and a single human boy had broken them. By the end of the day, the story had spread through the entire academy. Every student knew. Every teacher knew. The name Daniel was on every tongue. Some spat it like poison, others whispered it with awe. That evening, Arya sat alone in her small room at the academy dormitory. The walls were bare, the bed neatly made, the desk stacked with books. She stared at her reflection in the small mirror above the desk, her silver hair, her golden skin, her mixed eyes. She had always hated the mirror. It reminded her of what she was, of what others said she was. But tonight, when she looked, she saw something different. She saw the memory of Daniel sitting beside her, eating calmly as if nothing was wrong. She saw his defiance, his courage. For the first time, she wondered if maybe, just maybe, her mother had been right. Maybe her blood wasn't dirty. Maybe it was strong. A small smile touched her lips before fading quickly. She shook her head. She couldn't think like that. If she hoped too much, the pain would be worse later. But deep inside, a tiny spark remained. The next day, the courtyard was more crowded than usual. Arya stepped outside with her tray and her breath caught. Daniel was already there, waiting for her. He sat on the bench with his tray, waving as though this was the most natural thing in the world. But he wasn't alone. Dozens of students filled the windows, watching. Some whispered, some glared, some even smirked, waiting to see what would happen next. Arya's hands shook as she walked toward him. She sat down quietly, her cheeks burning under so many eyes. Daniel leaned toward her and whispered, "Don't worry. Let them watch." Her heart thudded painfully, but she nodded. Together they began to eat. The whispers grew louder. A teacher stepped into the courtyard, his robes flowing behind him. He walked quickly toward them, his face dark with anger. "Human," the teacher barked. "Do you know what you are doing? Do you know the shame you bring by sitting here?" Daniel looked up calmly, meeting the teacher's glare without fear. "If she eats outside, then so do I," he said simply. The teacher's eyes widened. His mouth opened, but no words came. The courtyard went silent again. Even the dust seemed to hang in the air, waiting. Daniel's voice cut through the silence. Steady and unshaken, "If she is dirty," he said, "then I am dirty too." The words rang out like a strike of thunder. The students in the windows gasped. The teacher's face turned red with fury. Arya sat frozen, her heart racing, her chest tight. She could barely believe what she had just heard. No one had ever spoken like that before. Not for her. Not for anyone. And as she looked at Daniel sitting tall, his eyes fierce, she felt something break inside her. Something heavy. Something painful. For the first time in her life, she felt the weight of her loneliness lifting, piece by piece. Daniel had defied them. For her. The academy was no longer quiet. Daniel's words had traveled through every hallway, every classroom, every corner. Students whispered them again and again like a flame that refused to go out. If she is dirty, then I am dirty too. Some laughed at the foolish human. Others were angry, calling him disrespectful, a troublemaker, but some spoke in hushed voices, almost in awe. Arya felt it wherever she went. Eyes followed her even more now. She could hear the whispers. She walks with him. He sat beside her again. Why would a human choose her? The attention was terrifying, but it was different too. For once, not everyone was mocking. Some were only curious, and for Arya, curiosity was easier to endure than cruelty. At lunchtime, the courtyard was no longer empty. When Arya pushed open the door, she gasped softly. Daniel was already sitting at their bench, his tray in front of him. But today the windows were crowded. Dozens of students pressed against the glass, watching as though a great drama was unfolding. Daniel looked up and waved casually. Hey, took you long enough. Arya hurried to sit beside him, her cheeks burning. She lowered her gaze to her tray, afraid of all the eyes staring at her. They're all watching, she whispered nervously. Good, Daniel said, tearing his bread and taking a bite. Let them see. The noise from the windows grew louder. Some students banged their hands on the glass. Others shouted insults. Human fool! Leave her! You dishonor us all. But Daniel ignored them. He spoke to Arya about small things, about Earth's blue skies, about the strange foods he missed, about the music he used to hear at night back home. His voice was calm, steady, as though the shouts behind him were nothing more than wind. Arya tried to answer, though her voice trembled at first. Slowly, her hand stopped shaking. She began to listen to his stories, her lips curving into a small smile. The more they ignored the crowd, the angrier the crowd grew. Finally, the courtyard door burst open. A tall teacher marched forward, his robe flowing like a storm. His eyes blazed with fury. Human! The teacher shouted. You dare insult the Academy's traditions again? You dare spit on our honor? Daniel set down his spoon and looked up calmly. If honor means cruelty, then I don't care for your honor. Gasps erupted from the windows. Arya's heart stopped. She stared at him, wide-eyed, unable to believe what he had just said. The teacher's face twisted with rage. You will be punished for this. Daniel stood slowly, his movements calm but firm. He faced the teacher, his voice steady. Punish me if you want, but I won't stop. If she eats outside, then I eat outside. If you call her dirty, then you call me dirty too. The courtyard was silent. The dust swirled in the air. Arya's hands trembled in her lap. The teacher glared at Daniel for a long moment, his fists clenched at his sides. Finally, with a growl, he turned sharply and stormed out, the door slamming behind him. The silence broke into chaos. Students shouted, some with anger, some with laughter, some with awe. The whispers spread again, louder than before. Arya sat frozen, her heart racing. She turned slowly to look at Daniel. He sat back down as though nothing had happened, picking up his bread once more. He noticed her staring and raised an eyebrow. What? You didn't think I'd stop, did you? Her lips parted, but no words came. She felt warmth rising in her chest, stronger than before. That evening, the academy was alive with noise. Students argued in the halls. Some said Daniel was a fool who would bring shame upon everyone. Others whispered that maybe, just maybe, he was brave. The Council of Elders had already been informed. Meetings were called. Rules were questioned. And everywhere the same question was asked. Why would a human do this? In her room, Arya sat at her desk, staring at her books. She couldn't focus. Her mind replayed the moment again and again. Daniel standing tall, his voice steady, his words sharp and fearless. She remembered the look on the teacher's face, the shock of the students, the silence that had followed. For so long she had been invisible. A shadow in the courtyard, a whisper in the halls. But now, because of Daniel, everyone saw her. It was frightening, but it was also powerful. She touched the mirror on her desk, her reflection staring back. Her silver hair glimmered in the light, her golden skin glowing faintly. For the first time, she didn't look away in shame. The next day, the academy was restless. Students gathered in groups, whispering excitedly. When lunch came, even more eyes turned to the courtyard. Arya's heart pounded as she stepped outside. Daniel was there, as always, waiting for her. But this time, something was different. 2 younger students were standing near the bench. They looked nervous, their trays clutched tightly in their hands. When Arya approached, they glanced at her quickly, then at Daniel. Daniel smiled at them. "You here to eat?" The younger boy nodded hesitantly. We wanted to sit here." "With her?" Arya's eyes widened. She looked at them in disbelief. No one had ever wanted to sit with her before. Daniel nodded and gestured to the bench. "Then sit." The two students sat down, their faces tense, but they didn't leave. The windows exploded with noise. Shouts, insults, laughter. But this time it wasn't just Daniel and Arya. This time there were others. Arya's chest swelled with something new. Not fear, not shame, but hope. By evening, the academy was in uproar. The elders were furious. They called Daniel to a meeting, demanding an explanation. He stood before them calmly, his voice firm. "You call her dirty," he said, "but I see someone stronger than any of you. She eats alone in the dust every day, and still she endures. If you think that is weakness, then you don't understand strength." The elders shouted at him, threatened him, warned him of punishment, but Daniel didn't bow. He didn't apologize. He only repeated his words. Outside the chamber, Arya waited nervously. When Daniel finally stepped out, he smiled at her. "Don't worry," he said softly. "They can't scare me." For the first time in her life, Arya believed it. That night, as she lay in bed, Arya thought of everything that had happened. The whispers, the defiance, the courage. The world around her was still cruel, still unjust. But it was changing. Slowly, painfully, but changing. The news of Daniel's defiance spread like wildfire through the academy. By morning, every student had heard the story of the human who dared to sit beside Arya, the girl they called Dustborn. Some students whispered in secret admiration, while others seethed with anger. Teachers and elders were furious, their faces red with indignation. Arya walked through the hallways with her tray, her heart pounding. Everywhere she went, eyes followed her. Some glared, some whispered, some stared openly. For the first time, she felt the weight of attention. Not the heavy weight of shame, but the light, strange weight of possibility. When she entered the courtyard, she stopped in her tracks. Daniel was already there, sitting at their bench with the same calm smile. But he wasn't alone this time. 3 students younger than Arya had joined him. They sat hesitantly on the edges of the bench, looking nervously at the crowd in the windows. Daniel glanced at Arya and nodded. "Sit," he said simply. Arya hesitated, her hands trembling. She could feel the eyes of hundreds upon her. The whispers were loud and cutting. "Traitor. Foolish human. How dare they sit together?" But she did not move away. She took a deep breath and sat down. "Good," Daniel said softly. "Let them watch." The other students, emboldened by Daniel's courage, began joining them. One by one, a few more stepped out of the shadows, sitting in the courtyard, refusing to fear the whispers. Some were human exchange students, others were aliens who quietly disagreed with the rules. By midday, the courtyard was full. The impure students, the quiet ones who had always eaten alone, now had company. The crowd in the windows stared in disbelief. Some teachers rushed to report the situation to the elders, but even they hesitated, unsure how to stop it. Arya felt a strange warmth in her chest. She was no longer alone. Inside the council chambers, the elders were in chaos. Crystal walls echoed with the sounds of angry voices. The elders, their robes flowing like storms, debated furiously. "He must be punished immediately," one elder shouted. "This human has dishonored our traditions." Another elder shook his head. "No, this is worse. By defying us openly, he has shown strength. The students are watching. They will follow him." Arya's name was mentioned repeatedly. "The Dustborn girl," they said. "The one who has caused this disturbance. She is weak, but he has made her a symbol." Outside, Arya and Daniel continued to eat. Daniel spoke quietly, telling small stories, laughing at little jokes. The crowd of students listened, their eyes wide. Some began to smile. Some even dared to join them, sitting beside Arya or the younger students. The elders' outrage grew. They sent messengers to the human exchange office, demanding Daniel's removal. The humans in charge received the complaints, but instead of punishing him, they defended his actions. "Humans do not stand by while cruelty happens," one diplomat said firmly. "He acted with courage and honor. You cannot punish him for that." The council's fury only deepened. How dare outsiders tell them what to do? How dare a human defy their long-held rules and protect a low-born alien? Back in the courtyard, Arya felt herself changing. She had spent so long hiding, lowering her head, avoiding attention. But now, with Daniel and the others by her side, she felt a strength she had never known. When a student from her class whispered a cruel remark, she looked up. "Shut up," she said firmly, her voice shaking slightly but carrying more confidence than she expected. The student froze. A few others whispered in surprise. Arya repeated herself a little louder this time. "Leave me alone!" It was a small act, but it changed something inside her. For the first time, she realized she did not have to remain silent. She did not have to endure humiliation. Daniel noticed the change immediately. "Good," he said softly. "Don't let them take your strength away." Arya nodded, her hands gripping her tray. She felt the courage growing inside her, like a small flame catching wind. The next few days were a turning point. The courtyard became a gathering place for students who were tired of fear and cruelty. Daniel remained calm, a quiet leader encouraging others to stand beside Arya. The elders tried to intervene. They sent teachers, messengers, and even warnings of punishment. But the students refused to scatter. Some of the younger students who had once eaten alone now led others to the courtyard. Their voices joined Arya's in small acts of defiance. One day, a particularly cruel student approached, sneering. "Why are you sitting here? Don't you know your place?" Arya looked at him, her eyes steady. "My place is wherever I choose to sit." The boy froze, stunned. He had never been spoken to like that before. The whispers of other students grew louder. Arya's words spread across the courtyard, carried by courage and determination. The elders were furious when they heard of it. They called a meeting with Daniel again, warning him that his actions could cause a rebellion. Daniel smiled faintly. "Let them watch," he said. "They need to see that strength is not in cruelty but in courage." Arya's confidence grew daily. She started speaking in class, answering questions, sharing ideas. Some teachers were surprised, some impressed, some uncomfortable. The other students began to notice. Slowly, respect began to replace fear in the courtyard. Yet not all were pleased. The older students, those loyal to the rigid rules, grew angry. They whispered threats. They tried to intimidate the younger ones who had joined Arya and Daniel. But the presence of the human boy gave them courage. No one left the courtyard. One afternoon, as the sun set and the dust swirled in long golden streaks across the ground, Arya looked around. The courtyard was full, crowded with students who would have once sat alone in shame. She realized with a sudden shock that she had led them here, not fully but partially. She looked at Daniel. "It's different," she said softly. "It is," he replied, "and it will get better." Step by step, Arya nodded. She had never believed she could make a difference. But now she saw that courage was contagious. The elders convened again, more furious than ever. They debated sending her away, removing Daniel, punishing the students. But with each passing day, more and more students refused to obey the old rules. The courtyard had become a symbol of rebellion, of courage, of change. Finally, one elder spoke quietly. "Perhaps we have underestimated them," he said. "Perhaps strength is not what we think." Though no one wanted to admit it openly, the tide was turning. The whispers of awe grew louder than the shouts of anger. For the first time, the academy began to question its traditions, and in the center of the courtyard, Arya sat tall. She ate her meal with her friends. She laughed quietly at a joke Daniel told, and she realized something she had never believed before. She was not weak. She was strong. The human had shown her the way. The academy had changed. It was subtle at first, a glance of respect instead of a sneer, a quiet murmur of support instead of laughter. Then it grew bolder. Students who once hid in corners now walked openly into the courtyard. Some human exchange students, inspired by Daniel, joined the gatherings. Others, aliens who had once followed the rules blindly, now whispered encouragement to Arya and the others. Arya felt the change, and she felt it in herself. She walked through the hallways taller than before, her silver hair catching the light of the twin suns. She no longer lowered her eyes in fear. She smiled softly at those who stared at her, and some smiled back. Daniel remained by her side, always calm, always quiet, always ready to defend those who could not defend themselves. His presence gave the students courage, and it gave Arya strength, but not everyone was pleased. The Council of Elders called an emergency meeting. The head elder, a tall figure draped in flowing robes, slammed his hands on the crystal table. His voice shook with anger. This human and his allies are corrupting our youth, he shouted. He is breaking every rule we have set for generations. Another elder frowned. Yes, he has shown them courage, but not the courage we approve of. He encourages defiance, disobedience. The students are following him blindly. The head elder narrowed his eyes. Then we must act. Remove him from the academy. Punish those who joined him. Make an example. But before any action could be taken, news reached them that stunned even the elders. The courtyard was full. Every student who had once sat quietly or alone had joined Aria and Daniel. Even some of the older students, known for their strict loyalty to the rules, were sitting in silence, watching, listening, and refusing to leave. The elders were powerless. Every order to remove them was ignored. Every threat was met with calm defiance. In the courtyard, Aria stood up, her tray in her hands. The suns cast long shadows over the students, but she did not shrink. She looked around at her peers, human and alien alike. She felt something new, responsibility. Daniel leaned slightly toward her. It's your turn, he whispered. Aria's chest tightened. She had been protected for so long, but now she realized she could protect others too. Taking a deep breath, she stepped forward. The students fell silent, waiting for her to speak. Her voice was soft at first, but it grew stronger with every word. I have been told I am dirty, she said. I have been told I do not belong. I have eaten alone in the dust while others laughed. But look at us now. We are not alone. We are here together. And together we are strong. A murmur of agreement rose from the crowd. Some students nodded. Others whispered quietly, yes, yes. Aria continued, her voice gaining courage. You call us disobedient. You call us foolish. But what is foolish? To sit quietly and accept cruelty? Or to stand up even when it is scary, and refuse to be ashamed of who we are? Daniel stood behind her, his eyes steady. He said nothing, but his presence gave her power. She did not need him to speak. The whispers grew louder. Students began to speak up. A younger alien boy stepped forward. She is right. We are not weak. We are not unclean. We will not hide any longer. Another student, a girl from the Solari species, added, We will eat where we choose. We will sit where we want. We are not afraid. The voices joined together, small at first, but growing louder and louder. It was no longer just Aria. It was the entire courtyard. A wave of courage swept through the academy. Inside the council chamber, the elders watched through the crystal walls. Their faces were pale, their hands trembling. They had never seen anything like this. The academy, which had been orderly and rigid for centuries, was alive with defiance. One elder muttered, Perhaps we have judged them wrong. But the head elder shook his head violently. No, this is chaos. This is destruction. Outside, Aria's voice rang clear over the crowd. We will not be afraid. We will not be ashamed. We will not be silent. The courtyard erupted in cheers, claps, and laughter. Students who had been fearful joined in, their voices adding to the chorus. Even some of the elders watching from the shadows could not deny the power of what was happening. Daniel stepped forward beside Aria. He raised his hand to quiet the crowd. When the silence settled, he spoke simply, calmly yet firmly. Strength is not in cruelty. Strength is in courage. Strength is in standing with those who are hurt, even when the world tells you not to. You have all shown that today. The students cheered again, louder this time. They clapped. They raised their hands. They celebrated their freedom to stand together. Aria looked around at her friends. Those who had once sat alone. Those who had feared to speak. Those who had felt powerless. Now they were united. And in that unity they found strength. The elders could not stop it. They could not punish them. The tradition had been challenged, and the students had chosen courage over fear. Later that evening, Aria sat with Daniel on their bench, the sun setting behind them. The courtyard was empty now, but the energy of the day lingered. You did it, she said softly. Daniel shook his head. No, you did it. I only showed you it was possible. Aria smiled. She had learned so much in the past days about courage, about strength, about standing for what is right. But most of all, she had learned that one person's defiance could ignite change in the hearts of many. She looked out over the academy, at the buildings bathed in the golden sunset. A new era had begun. The rules had not disappeared, but the fear that upheld them had. And that was enough. Aria leaned back on the bench, feeling the warmth of the sun on her skin. She no longer felt small. She no longer felt ashamed. Beside her, Daniel smiled. Ready for tomorrow? Arya nodded. Yes, we'll keep going. Together they stood, walking back toward the dormitories. They knew the battle for change was only beginning. But they also knew this. Courage was contagious, and no rule, no matter how old, could stand against the strength of those who refused to bow. And in that moment, Arya understood something her mother had told her long ago. Her blood was not dirty. It was strong. It carried the power of two worlds, and it had finally found its voice. The Academy had witnessed the first spark of a revolution. And humanity, through a single human boy, had shown once more that courage, compassion, and defiance could move the hearts of even the most rigid societies. The suns dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant colors. Arya and Daniel walked together, side by side, ready to face whatever came next. The world was still cruel, still unfair in many ways. But now for the first time Arya believed in hope. And with hope anything was possible.